welcome everybody, and thank you for being here. This is our second webinar for the Top Mentorship Program. And for those of you who I haven't gotten to meet yet, my name is Kenna Bell. I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator on the RMA side here at the IOA. And I'm really excited to welcome our two presenters tonight. We have Mark Geistlinger and Jack Knight. Mark is the Client Services Coordinator for MOSA Certified Organic. And he was also an organic inspector for many years. And Jack is, you know him as one of our top mentors here at the IOA. He's also on our board, and he was an organic inspector as well for many years, starting in 1999. So I'm really excited for their presentation today and to learn more about organic inspection from them and their expertise. So that is all I've got for now, and I'll go ahead and pass it on to Mark and Jack.
All right, welcome everybody.
Yes, well, welcome.
Yeah, so we're going to do three things tonight. We're going to have some introductions. We just started with Jack and me. We're going to have a pretty short presentation, the introduction to the organic farm inspection, and then we'd like to have plenty of time for your questions and discussion. So we have some questions for you for the introductions. And can everybody see the screen? Do you see the screen sharing? So we've got 4 questions for you. Where's your farm located? What's the scope of your farm? What kind of products, crops, livestock, etc. do you grow and raise? How many years into your transition are you, or how many years have you been farming or farming certified organic if you're a mentor? And then we've got a question for you mentees. What's one thing you want to learn tonight? We'll make sure to check that box. And for mentors, what's one inspection practice that worked for you? So who wants to go first, or do you want to be voluntold? How about you, Jean? So go ahead and unmute yourself.
There, I was trying to figure out how to unmute myself. And now I have to figure out how to fix my screen so my Zoom ratio allows me to actually see everything in the window. Okay, that's better. Thank you for being patient with me. And thank you for doing this. This is wonderful. My farm is in Marion, Iowa. And I have about 6 acres. I've transitioned to fruit, nuts, and vegetables, and I am taking 40 acres out of conventional corn and soybeans and transitioning that. And that's probably the full scope of tillable acres I have to transition. So this would be my first year of transition. And, oh, I need to learn so many things. I don't know a lot about row crops. So a lot of my questions have to do with actually agriculture itself. So I'm not trying to unlearn something I already knew from a conventional perspective. I'm trying to learn everything. But I know, like with the vegetables and the fruit trees, in having never gone through an agriculture process, knowing what the what is important to an inspector is really helpful, because then we can know what to prioritize on the farm, and like what we're doing, even in terms of like organizing our binder to make sure it's an efficient, document for the inspector to look through, would be really helpful. Mark, if you're talking, you're muted.
Thank you. Just trying to repeat a couple of things you said there, Jean. Fruit trees and produce, but then also working in some row crops. So learning what's important to the inspector, record keeping, but then also learning row crop agronomy. I think we'll have no problem checking those off. Okay, who's next? We've got Ethan and I think Clint, is that right? One of you want to go?
So this is Gary Welch. It's Cliff's
Gary.
name that comes across, but it's Gary Welch. Our farm is located in northeast Iowa by Lansing. The scope of the farm, I guess we have market hogs, we have beef cattle, we have a laying house, and we grow pullets. So I have two sons that farm with me, and we all stay pretty busy. I mentioned we had beef cows, about 160 beef cows. And we actually got certified in '88 was the first year we were certified. We started transitioning in '79, but we got our first certificate in '88. I guess one practice that I work really hard before the inspector gets there is have my paperwork in line before he gets there. Don't mean he's going to ask the right questions, but it's nice to have all you can in a row before you get there.
Oh, I love it. I'm trying to think of an animal you don't have on your farm, Gary.
We do not milk
Maybe
cows.
sheep. Okay.
Sheep.
So dairy cattle. All right. Man, I love it. Certified since '88. Okay, you've seen a lot of organic inspections and inspectors.
Yes.
Paperwork in line, and then kind of I'd love to unpack that recognition that sometimes what you get ready isn't exactly what the inspector asks about. So that's maybe a wise statement for us to get into in the question and answer time. Ethan, it says Ethan's iPhone. Is this Ethan?
Hello, I am coming to you just about ready to go on the road here for my daughter's graduation practice. But I'm Ethan Book. I'm with the Iowa Organic Association, and Kenna is kind of taking my place tonight. But since I was standing still for a moment while I unloaded chickens, I thought I would call in and take a listen.
All right, that Ethan. Jack, can you hear us? Do you want to put on your mentor hat and talk about your farming and experience?
Yes. Well, I can explain my mentee's operation too as well. I'm a mentor for Dusty Hines, and he has both a seed growing business and a chestnut growing business. And there are some agronomic crops as well, mostly hay. And so I'm also, as well as advising on future organic certification. My job is mostly to make sure that the bookkeeping is ready for future certification, and that the practices that we are doing on this land, won't get in the way of organic certification. Most of the property is certifiable, although we don't anticipate being inspected this year. And for myself, you already heard a brief introduction. I've a long time inspector, and I also have a background in forestry and horticulture. So it's a really good fit for Dusty and I to work together. So that's what I got for the group for right now.
Yeah, I love it. All right, folks. Well, like Kenna said, think of those questions, think of those comments. I'll zip through this presentation, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and discussion and hearing from our mentors. We're going to talk about what is an organic inspection, what isn't an organic inspection, what are the logistics for an inspection, what physical areas are inspected during the inspection. We're going to talk about the dreaded record keeping that a few of you have mentioned. And we're going to talk about how to have a great inspection, like not just adequate, or, you got through it like a medical procedure or something, but you actually enjoyed it and you had a good time with it. Okay, so here we go. So what is the organic inspection? Well, it's the third of 4 certification steps. So first, the farmer applies for certification, fills out a bunch of forms their first year, either electronically or on paper. And then the certification agency does an initial review. So this is a desk audit or a desk review. They look over all of that application, all of these supporting documents, and they're looking for two main things. One, deal breakers, reasons why this operation probably can't comply with certification. If you say you use Roundup for weed control, well, you can't get certified organic. And then they're also looking for blanks, so gaps in the forms. Somebody didn't fill something out. Often that's because somebody didn't think something applied to them, but it does. So the initial review step is actually really important because it's where we get a very complete application for the inspection. We really want the inspector to show up and not have to do all this work figuring out what the farmer is trying to do. We really want the inspector to show up with a complete application at a farm that looks like it is going to be certifiable. It looks like this farm can qualify and get certified this year. Okay, so that's the third step, the inspection. The fourth step is the final review. The file goes back to the certification agency with the inspector's reports, and it's reviewed by another reviewer on the certification team. Okay, so we've got two bookended reviews, the initial review and the final review. And by the time we get to this fourth and final step, most people get certified organic. We have found problems earlier in the process. We've shut it down at initial review if it really looks like they can't get certified. So most folks can get certified. Sometimes we need information from them. The inspector found out that they didn't have seed tags from a couple years ago. We really have to have seed information, for example. Okay, so those are the four steps. Third step is inspection. What else is the organic inspection? It is required annually. Obviously, your first year when you want to get certified organic, you've got to get inspected and certified early in the year prior to the time you want to have an organic crop to sell. If you're a vegetable farm, you should really apply for certification late fall or winter so that your certifier can get you through that certification process in time for you to sell that first organic crop. As soon as we can see some things at your farm, we'll show up with an inspector if we've done those first two steps, application and initial review. When you've already been certified, you might have an inspection later in the year. But every year you'll get inspected. What else is the organic inspection? It's about half record review and about half field and facility tour. It is a comparison between three things. What's actually happening on this farm? What did the farmer say is happening on the farm in their organic plan? And what do the organic standards require? So the inspector is keeping those three things in his or her head as they're going on the tour. The farmer said that they used manure on the organic plan, but then there's no evidence that the farmer uses manure in their fertility program. So let's talk about that. Or the vice versa. Oh, here's a load of some input amendment, fertility amendment that just arrived. What's that? Is that on your list of inputs? Okay, and then a inspector will know the organic rules to know whether something is allowable or not. What else or what isn't the organic inspection? It is not the final certification decision. The inspector does not make a decision at the inspection. The inspector submits their findings to the certifier in that report. Now the inspector tells the farmer, the client, what concerns they've found, right? And they put that in the report and they give a affirmation form to the farmer at the inspection that says, hey, I think you're going to need to get us these seed tags. Or I think it looks like you're using a starter corn fertilizer blend that we don't know about yet. Okay, so the inspector has a pretty good idea of what the concerns are and they'll tell the client, but they don't tell the client whether they got certified or not. The inspection is not a consultation. The inspector is not there to sell some product like, oh, you've got some Yellowy leaves, you should use my high nitrogen fertilizer product. But the inspector is also not there to help the farmer overcome apparent barriers to certification. So if the farmer doesn't have a great record keeping system, the inspector can't say, hey, do this. You know, you gotta get this software program, or you've got to get a calendar. It would be appropriate for the farmer, excuse me, for the inspector to say, hey, there's lots of different ways that you can do this. Here's 4 or 5 or 6, or there's a great Iowa State paper on this topic, or some extension office paper on this, but I can't tell you what to do to overcome this observed problem. Okay, so it's not a consultation. It's not adversarial. If it's adversarial, something's gone wrong. You know, maybe the inspector's making too big of a deal about a thing or getting personally involved. Maybe the farmer is feeling defensive. Something's gone wrong. Okay, so it should not be adversarial. It's like other human communication. If it starts to feel heated, folks need to take a break, come back to that topic later, whatever. But it shouldn't be adversarial or a conflict. In fact, it's probably a lot of compliments. You know, most inspectors are there because they support organic farming. This is how they think food should be produced, and they're passionate about it. And so if they see good things at your farm, they're probably going to tell you, those are some nice looking calves. Wow, you didn't leave very many weeds for me to inspect. You know, they're going to be throwing compliments out left and right. Let's talk about some logistics to the organic farm inspection. First of all, it's scheduled in advance. So in your application, you tell your certification agency either good times for your inspection or more likely bad times. You know, very few inspectors. What's up,
Mark?
Chuck? Yeah,
Mark, could I add that
of course.
we want, as an inspector, we want to make it work. We want to make the whole thing work. And also as an inspector, we're responsible to the agency and the NLP and the farmer and the consumer. And we have to balance all those things out within the rule. And so that's a way to summarize what we're doing there. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Jack and I learned early on the organic inspector is the eyes and ears, sometimes the taste buds of the organic consumer. Like, we are often the only person that's on the organic farm. We are the representative of the agency of the organic program, though we don't work for the feds. But that inspector has this really important role representing all these different groups. So the inspection is scheduled in advance. When you fill out your application forms, like I said, you'll say some days that you don't want to get inspected. You try to be flexible, but if Thursday is your farmer's market day and you're going to 2 different farmers market from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., not a good day for the inspection, and it's okay to not have it on that day. You know, almost everybody says, hey, I don't work on Sundays. Most inspectors don't either. Most businesses say, I don't have a Saturday and Sunday available. If you can make a Saturday available, some inspectors would really appreciate that. So phone, email, text. Some inspectors still use a postcard saying, hey, I've scheduled your inspection for this date, 3-4 weeks out. Call me if it doesn't work. Okay, so try to be flexible with your inspector. But for a crop farm, allow about half a day. You know, I bet Gary's farm, you can't do that operation in half a day. But for everybody else, if you are a crop farm, allow a whole day, and I'll bet it'll take half a day, and you'll say, oh, I've got all this time now. But, you know, allow plenty of time, because if you feel rushed, it's not going to go well. If an inspector is rushed, that's not good inspecting. If they say, hey, I got to get to my next inspection because I scheduled 3 or 4 for this day, that's a bad scheduling event. Okay, so allow plenty of time to do good work.
And say, Mark, if I could add,
Go for it.
I'd like to add that the length of the inspection has a lot to do with how well prepared the farmer is.
Yep.
And I mean, we'll sit with you at the kitchen table and go over and wait for you to get caught up with your book work, but we'd rather be walking the field edges and looking at grain and things like that. So the more prepared you are, the more fun we'll have looking around outside instead of counting seed tags or whatever. So that's my little speech on that.
Yep. And like Jack suggested, it's almost always due to records. It's almost always that we're hunting down some record that we need. We're literally sometimes going up to the attic and getting that box of sales receipts or something. So it's almost always the record keeping that slows things down. So we are going to talk about that. Other logistical considerations: have a nice place to do the records. Almost every inspector has some horror story of being in a really, dirty place. That's kind of an afterthought to do the records. And it just is not conducive to human beings doing good work. So think about that ahead of time. It does not have to be your kitchen table. You don't have to invite the inspector into your home. If you want to, that's great. It could be a desk in the dairy barn. It could be a nice table set up in the equipment shed. That's fine. Just make a nice place to do the inspection where you can spread papers out. Most inspectors today use a laptop, so it's nice if you can get an electrical outlet for them. They probably come with their own Wi-Fi. If they can use yours, that's a nice touch as well. Provide transportation for the tour. Usually that's a truck. Sometimes it's mules or horses. Sometimes it's a four-wheeler. Sometimes it's a buggy. Sometimes inspectors need to drive themselves. I've driven lots of Amish farmers around. I lit some dry grass on fire once with my little Honda Civic's catalytic converter, and we had to put out a little brush fire. But think about transportation and getting out to all these fields, and think of a nice way to do that. If you can walk, great. But otherwise, we got to find some transportation to scoot around to the buildings and facilities and fields. All right, let's talk about that tour. What goes on during the organic inspection tour? First of all, the inspector will see all fields. It used to be that inspectors would do a sampling of fields. Those days are gone. The inspector must see all fields. If there is some reason why this field has a 3 feet of mud to get into it and you just can't get there, well, that might be acceptable. But really, the inspector is going to need to see all fields, because that is now a requirement for the National Organic Program. So try to think about that ahead of time. Make sure that the certification agency knows how far some remote fields are. They should ask for that in their application. Describe your off-farm fields and how far away they are from the main facility. The inspector will need to see crop storage, hay mows, grain bins, veggie coolers.
And Mark,
Yeah.
if I could add, on the field tour, that's when we get to pull up a plant and look for pests and identify weeds as part of the inspection, and that's often the most enjoyable part. And so to look at every field, and we look at all the field maps, and we have to see every field, but sometimes there'll be 4 or 5 fields that intersect at one point, and so we can see a lot of fields. That's why the tour is planned, so we cover the most amount of fields in the least amount of time. Of course, unless there's a buffer concerns, or there's a new buffer, or there's a problem with the buffer in a previous inspection, then we gotta see that too. So that's my comment there, Mark.
Yeah. That's a good one. So like Jack said, we're looking for a map. Does the map match the field? And then we're looking for all the agronomic practices. Did you say soybeans were in this field? Why do I see corn? Why do I see part of the field is in sweet corn? And that almost always happens. Oh yeah, that's my kids' high school spending money for the sweet corn patch. It's not necessarily a deal breaker, but you got to tell your certifier about all the crops that you're growing. So we're looking at the map. We're looking at your weed control. We're looking at your pest control. We're looking at your fertility management. So some fields you're going to drive by and look at them from a distance, say, yep, that's corn. Okay. But that's also how there's been some fraud. You know, people literally there's that guy who cultivated his outer rows of corn and sprayed the snot out of the inner rows of his corn because he knew the inspector just drove by, right? So that's just bad inspecting. So a good inspector gets out and gets into these fields and has a look and sees what's going on. Crop storage, post-harvest handling. Boy, whatever you're doing on your farm, maybe you are cleaning grain, or maybe you are mixing grain. Maybe you're washing some vegetables or packing vegetables for a CSA. Whatever you're doing with the crop after harvest, that's part of your organic certification. Some people are quite elaborate handlers, right? I think I saw Francis Thicky is on your group of mentors, and you know they take their milk and bottle it. So there's lots of post-harvest handling that really crosses that line from crop production into a finished product production. Livestock housing, that should be on the map.
Just a second to add to that processing. As inspectors, we look at your other certifications and other inspections, and we don't do those inspections, but we take a look at those. You know, if you have any food safety courses or you're GAP certified or whatever, we take a look at that. That's all.
Yeah, like dairy, grade A dairy, Jack, and that kind of thing. Again, just to make sure that you're not in gross violation of those things, or that livestock housing, livestock. Got to go see the livestock. If you have pasture-based animals, you know, let's make sure we can get out to those pastures. If it's a dairy, maybe you hold them in the yard for morning milking before you put them out to pasture so the inspector can see them, so you don't have to get out to that distant pasture. You know, think about making this easy to show off your farm. Safety concerns. You know, when I was a youthful inspector and didn't know a Holstein from a Hereford, from a heifer, and first saw a bull in the field, you know, a little unnerving, and I didn't know about this. And you know, it might be nice to say to the inspector, hey, we got a bull in this field. You want to see them see this group from the fence.
Another thing that our inspectors have to be aware of is the biosecurity thing. Like, we wouldn't go on 2 pig farms on the same day. Not so much for dairy. I don't know what the chicken world is like out there, but I think sometimes it's not merited for us to even go in the barn, depending on, you know, how many days it's been between flocks and that. But inspectors are trained in that, and we're well aware of that. But it's good to talk about out loud. You know, no matter how well prepared you are with the biosecurity, talk about it out loud at the beginning of the inspection, just to double check.
Yeah, absolutely. My agency, MOSA, has now taken to asking people in our get to know you form, the new client overview, hey, do you have any biosecurity concerns we should be aware of that we're not going to be able to tell? For example, the vegetable farm that also keeps chickens, they're not requesting certification of their chickens, but they want us to observe that protocol that Jack just mentioned. Don't come to my farm if you just saw a poultry operation in the morning. And so a good certification agency's forms will have that information in there, but then absolutely you need to discuss that with the inspector during the opening meeting. Another part of the tour is input storage areas. Boy, inputs is that broad term for fertilizers, pesticides, feed ingredients, feed supplements, soaps, teat dips, sanitizers, everything that's kind of a chemical coming into your farm that you use in your operation. Have that available, have that ready for the inspector, and do a pre-inspection. Look it over. Make sure that you've told the certifier about all of your inputs on your farm. If you have some prohibited inputs on your farm, that can be okay, but maybe you put a little note on the bottle. This is for my horses. This antibiotic is for emergency use only. Okay, this prohibited feed substance is because I keep these kind of animals over here. And it's for those animals, right? So think like an inspector. If you've got some prohibited chemicals on your farm, an inspector is going to be justifiably concerned about that. And so it might be nice to have that talked about ahead of time and, like written on the bottle. Hey, let's talk about records. Records, we have not met a farmer once. I'll bet Jack has not either, who loves record keeping. We keep looking, hundreds, thousands of organic farmers, and literally not one of them goes into organic farming to keep records. It is now a part of farming. It's absolutely required for good business and for organic certification, but almost nobody just loves it. So how do you do it well to have a great inspection? It is almost always the records that cause a delay, like Jack said, a lengthening of the inspection and then a delay later to get certified. So how do you work on records ahead of time? First of all, the general thing I'm going to say is take agency for your records. Really own the records. And even if you don't like it, you'll like it a lot more if you have prepared ahead of time and gotten stuff ready. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about your completed organic plan. That's the main part of your application where you describe how you're going to farm organically. Have that thing out. It can be on your computer if you fill it out electronically. It can be in paper if you did or didn't, but have that out because the inspector will, and the inspector is going to be asking you questions on there. Oh, it says that you, use mulch for weed control. I'm not seeing any mulch out here. You're just not doing it this year or what? Remember what you said in your organic plan. It's okay to maybe have to change something at the inspection, but that's not ideal. You really need to have a completed organic plan ready for the inspector. So if you can review this ahead of time, if you see something on there that, oh, I've changed this, it could be okay, but you should probably tell your certification agency before the inspection so that you really have a completed organic plan. So you have that ready at the inspection. What else do you have at the inspection? You have your input containers. We already talked about having the input areas. So pesticides, fertilizers, and then have receipts for those. Really make sure, try to line everything up. Oh, I bought that stuff at the hardware store. Well, maybe you try to go back to the hardware store and say, hey, can you reprint my receipt? It's not necessarily a deal breaker, but it's really nice if all the inputs you have are represented by receipts. Shows that that's what you bought and it shows in the quantity. Seeds are really important. They've gotten more complicated over the years. You cannot use treated seeds. You cannot use genetically modified seeds. You are supposed to use organic seeds if they are commercially available. Okay, so there's lots of things you can't do, and you need to show what you've done. So that means a seed tag or packet. That means a seed receipt. And that means what we call verification forms. If you buy organic seed and you've got the ticket, the tag or the packet and the receipt, you're done. But if you didn't buy organic seed, now you've got a lot of verification forms. You need to show that you searched for organic seed and just couldn't find it. You need to show that the seed is not genetically modified. And you need to show that the seed is not treated with a prohibited substance. So that's a lot of verifications. And you need to be able to show that to your inspector. You need to have your activity logs ready. So what do I mean by that? That means that you write down what you did in the field or what you did with your livestock. This sow had this many piglets on this date. This field I planted on this date. In this field, I'm using this variety. Okay, so having your activity logs ready is a great thing to do for your inspection. Actually going through them a few days before the inspection to look for completeness is a great idea. You should have your last review letters. What do I mean by that? Well, it's those two bookended reviews that we talked about at the beginning. The initial review hey, thank you for applying for certification. Here's some things to have ready at your inspection. That's really the nature of the initial review letter. And then there's the final review letter from last year. What is that? That's where we said, hey, you got certified. Congratulations. Now, here's some things that you should work on to improve. There's almost always some little notes where you could improve something. Maybe you did use non-organic seed, and a note of improvement would be, it looks like you used non-organic seed this year. Really try to strengthen your search to try to look for organic seed.
Yeah, Mark,
Go.
I'd like to comment here on the certification determination letters and actually any correspondence that you have with the agency. The simple takeaway is, and for fear of feeling gruff, do what the office tells you to do. It's that simple. Do what they ask, and it'll be a lot more fun at the inspection.
Yeah.
That's as gruff as Jack Knight gets.
Yeah, and the only thing I would soften it with, Jack, is if you don't agree with what the certification agency told you or you don't understand it, for heaven's sakes, call them back and say, I don't agree with this. That's not what happened. But
Yeah.
Jack's absolutely right. If they told you, hey, you didn't have your tags at last year's inspection and it took 2 months to get those seed tags out of you, have them at your inspection. Absolutely do that this next year. There is a ratcheting up. You will hear this ratcheting, that things that went from a reminder go to a concern, go to a non-compliance. Like these things don't just you don't get the same kind of penalty the next year. If you continually don't do something, at some point you risk getting certified. More records review, organic sales records. Okay, so it may not apply your first year. It's easy when you've already been certified, right? Somebody like Gary, we got lots of things to look through. All those cattle sales, hog sales, etc. For somebody who's new, we'll probably ask, okay, what are you planning to sell this year? And how are you going to document that? Are you going to take products to the farmer's market? Okay, do you have like a load list that you take to the market? Do you keep track of how many dollars you make each time? Are you going to do a CSA? Okay, do you sell shares? Do you keep a list of what you give each week? Like, hey, here's what's in your box this week. So some sort of a sales record. It's not always a cut and dried receipt, right? It can be a settlement sheet if you're selling grain, but each kind of product sale has its typical record trail, what we call an audit trail. If you're selling grain, you're going to have a settlement sheet from the buyer that says, here's how much grain we couldn't buy because it was not acceptable or whatever. You're going to have a check, some sort of a payment from them. You're going to have a weight ticket. You're going to have a clean truck affidavit. You're going to have some sort of a storage record on your farm. Like, we know the records that you should have, and we can talk to you ahead of time about how to build that, how to make sure you've got good sales records. All right, let's talk about some of the things that Jack and I have already touched on, and that is how to have an amazing inspection. And we just can't emphasize enough the importance of developing a record system that works for you. Most certifiers have some suggestions for you, but they're not going to prescribe it. They're not going to tell you must do it this way, because they want to allow some individuality. They want to have something that works for you. If you are a single farmer, having your notebook, having your spreadsheet, your calendar might work great. If you are a farmer with 5 employees, you might have a clipboard in each tractor, each truck. And it might, like, you tell the workers, it's part of your job. You don't leave until you write down what you did that day. I want to know how many hours. I want to know if you sprayed something. I want to know what fields you worked in. That's part of working here. Okay, so that's an appropriate system for a place with employees. It's going to be different if you're a solo farmer. So, and you can talk with your certification agency ahead of time. Hey, I don't know what to do. That's what I do in my new role now in client services. I help clients set up the system ahead of time. So develop a good record system that works for you. Love to hear with Gary in the comments time about, what's worked on their farm. The big thing I would say is once you have a good record keeping system, practice for the inspection. Like, don't just, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. Really take it out for a test drive. So like I was talking about seeds, the certifier probably has a seed table that you fill out. You can see on MOSA's seed table over on the right, it's the inspector use only section. Well, I tell farmers, print out another one of these seed tables and give yourself a self audit. Do you have the records you need? Do you have a tag and a receipt for everything? Do you have that organic search document? Do you have a non-GMO letter if needed? So, find out yourself ahead of time what you have and don't have. If you have already been inspected, if this is your returning year, you'll have an inspection report from last year. Take a look at it. You can see what the inspector is going to be looking for. And you can see maybe some areas where it was hard to explain things to the inspector, where they didn't seem to understand, right? And you can improve those. But if you are brand new to this, you can ask the agency for a blank copy of the inspection report. It's like getting the test before you take it. Just ask them, hey, I want to see what the inspector is going to be filling out. You'll have one for livestock. You'll have one for crops. If you do mushrooms, greenhouse, wild crops, those each have their own inspection report as well. Your certifier probably has a records checklist, or there's lots of them available out on the internet. And you can go through that checklist and actually check off when you've got things all ready. All right. Another key thing to having an amazing inspection, I think Jack mentioned this, is having an opening meeting. Talk about things at the opening meeting. Do you have any biosecurity concerns? Is the weather looking like it's going to turn south and you should really go outside first because it's going to storm on you? Is your husband, who does the records, here but has to go off to go to the kid's graduation or something, and so you should do record keeping first? Plan out the day. Take ownership of the day and make it work for both you and the inspector. A lot of inspectors, go ahead,
To
Jack.
add to that a little bit, Mark, if you have a bookkeeper, have them there, especially if you have a very big farm or very complex farm at all. Pay that person an hour to be there or be on the phone. Oh, that really helps a lot. I really love to see the accountant when I'm on the farm. I like the crops better, but I like to see the accountant too.
Yeah, Jack, would you give them the sample audit ahead of time and say, hey, if the bookkeeper's here and knows the sales records, I'll pick a sample audit at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you've got the bookkeeper, use them. Most inspectors have some opinion. They kind of like to do something first, and then, and that's okay. They can have an opinion, but you can have an opinion too. Okay, this is a conversation. This is a relationship. You don't have to just sit there and obey and submit, right? You don't want to be inflexible or disagreeable, but it's okay to say, hey, would you mind? I'd kind of like to get this record keeping done first. Or, again, I'd like to show you around first and kind of have you understand my farm. It's kind of unique. I really want you to get a feel for it. I got some interesting things going on here. I think like Jack's Dusty might be in that situation. You got different crops and stuff. So it's okay to line that up during the opening meeting and plan the time together.
An inspection is really a long interview.
Yep.
Basically, I mean, I don't hear that word used very often, but basically a very long interview, and it's partially up to the inspector to make it not like totally dry, even though it's very businesslike. I always like to chat with, if I see somebody likes a particular kind of tractor or a particular rare breed of animal, I'll weave that into the conversation a little bit. And that's another way to have an amazing inspection, is to blend a look. I find out whatever their special interest is and don't ignore it, even though it's not totally pertinent to the inspection. So that's another amazing
Yeah,
tactic
that's
there, Mark.
absolutely true. One of my first mentoring inspectors was a row crop and beef cattle farmer, and he knew equipment. He loved equipment. He loved working on old equipment, and farmers loved him because they would spend 15 minutes at least talking equipment. And, I could barely keep the red and green equipment apart. And this guy knew, to the year, the model numbers and what they did. And he worked that actually into his inspection report. And I asked him, John, why do you do that? That doesn't matter. And he said, it shows the certifier that I was there, and the farmers love it. Because they read my inspection reports and they love the, you know, my awareness of things that are important to them and and a lot of times it really matters to the organic operation. They've got 3 different cultivators for different times of the year and different soil conditions. It really matters to the farmer. And it's nice when an inspector gives a shout out there and says, hey, I see you. This is a good deal. And you've got something that's important to you. I'm going to make it important to my visit here. I'm only here for once a year. That's all I've got for the presentation. So would love to now entertain questions. If you don't have questions, I will ask you things. I'm sure Jack will ask you things. I'd love to hear from folks who are getting started or who have already done this. So maybe what's in our chat? That might be a place to start, or
Yeah, well, I just want to say thank you so much, Mark and Jack. That was really awesome. And I do not see any questions yet in the chat, but since there's just 2 of us here, if either of you have questions, or Gary, if you have advice that maybe wasn't touched on, go for it.
Mark, I do have one thing. I didn't hear you mention anything about lot numbers to follow these grains all the way through and livestock. That's something that, we do with every invoice we do, so we know exactly where it came from. So,
yeah, you're doing great. You say a couple more things there. I'm happy to talk, but what is your lot number system? What's the importance of it, and how's it used at the inspection?
well, how it's used at the inspection, it can go back. Our lot numbers, usually we use the date that we sell. Like if we're talking corn now, date we sell, what load it is, what it is, how many bushel, uh, and then we put the year in that lot number also, so we know what year that crop of corn, whether it was 23 or 22 crop, because we don't sell everything the same year, so we know where we went back to get it, I guess, so livestock, it's an invoice that goes to whoever we sell it to, and you get the head number on it, and tag number, and all that kind of stuff. Color, we even put color of the animal on it, so we know. Like the chickens, we do that more in one lot number instead of having a ID for each animal. We have a flock number, so, and that flock number, it falls all the way through the feed. We get a load of feed in and we say it's going to flock 16 or whatever it is, so just you have a trail backwards.
And what I'm hearing there, Gary, is it not only you're not just jumping through some hoop for the certifier, it works for your operation. It
Oh,
provides
yes.
you instant information that you can use for your record keeping to add efficiency, traceability, etc.
Yeah, about 4 years ago, we put in a computerized feed mill, and that simplified things a lot for us. You could go back any day and figure out how many bushel of anything that we put through that group of livestock, whether it's hogs or chickens or whatever it is, so, or sold, whatever it is, so.
I love it.
That simplified a lot of the record keeping. It really did. I mean, it's there every day, and that's one thing else I want to say is this record keeping don't start the day, 2 days before you start to get inspected. We try to keep it in a file where we go back, and as we do each one, or sell a load of corn, we make sure all our truck affidavits and everything's in line of that load, because it's hard to go back through them all the 3 days before certification and get all that information. So if you get it all as you're doing it, it's a lot easier.
And Gary, you're using a combination of paper and computer. Like
Right.
you get clean truck affidavits, bills of lading. You probably have paper, and so that's in one place or organized chronologically or something.
usually by date. We do it by
Okay.
date, usually from the last time we were inspected. We cut everything off with the last inspection and we start all over again and we compile that until our next inspection, you know, so.
Any questions, Gene? Something about your operation and how it would fit in?
I have a couple questions. So I just got my egg handling license, but where I'm washing eggs is not at the farm. Do I need to get both places inspected? And if, okay, so the answer is yes. So I can just tell them that so they can schedule the extra time to come down.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
then,
They should have a quick section that says, do you have any offsite areas?
okay, so I filled out and submitted my paperwork for certification before I got my egg handling license. So I need to update that. That's
Yeah.
what you're saying is I need to update that so they know. And then they would know that. Okay, great. And then another question I had here is I just downloaded this Farm Tabs software program. It is supposed to be a record keeping system for organic operations developed by IDOLS.
Yeah.
Does anybody here have experience with it? Is it something that would be useful?
I don't, and I would say probably. Gary or Jack or Ethan or Kenna, do you know about this?
We're actually certified through IDOLS and it's something we don't, we just kind of use our own software program and hadn't been putting it together, I guess. So we haven't looked into that, I guess, yet, so.
Okay.
Jean, what is the software called?
Farm Tabs, like
Okay.
TABS. And it was developed like by Jason Graham.
Oh,
And he also works at IDOLS, right? So or wait, maybe it's not IDOLS, maybe it's Iowa Valley RC&D. I'm sorry, I bet it's Iowa
that would
Valley
make sense. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I've heard of Ambrook. That's the only other one kind of like it, but yeah, unfortunately, I don't know either. I'm sorry.
Well, any of those computerized programs or software stuff, sometimes they're designed more for a vegetable farm that has 100 kinds of vegetables in a super long season. And then other ones are designed for something like Gary, you know, a mixed crop and livestock. And then there's real simple systems just for the crop farmers. So just look closely at what it is, Gene, and see if it's designed for the kind of operation you have. I guess that's just common sense.
I think
Yeah,
it's
and do you,
Oh,
It
sorry.
could
go
very
ahead.
well
ahead.
be a lot more than you need. That is possible.
and does it add value to your operation? Like you need to keep records as a farmer. Your certifier needs you to keep records. And so try to marry those. You know, most of your farm is your business. And so you need your record keeping system to drive your profitability, your efficiency, etc. The certifier needs it to work during that inspection. And, you know, maybe if you have a surprise inspection later in the year or something, but the main thing is to have your record keeping system work for you to drive your business. If you can put your certification record keeping into that, more power to you because it'll motivate you to keep it well. If it's some horrible thing over here that you got to do for certifier, probably won't keep it very well. You know, but it may be that there's some things you need to add to this system to make sure it does check a certification box. I would ask your certifier. I'd say, hey, I really would like somebody to help me. I want to do well on my inspection. Can you kind of take me through your sample audit to see if this works? So there's the part of the inspection report is the sample audit at the end. We do one for crops, one for livestock. If you've got livestock, going to trace back a crop and we're going to see if the amount you sold is justified by the amount of production capacity you had, right? If you got 10 acres of corn and you sold 10,000 acres of field corn, well, you either are an amazing farmer, you know, or you're cheating. And so there's an in-out balance and a traceability thing. And so see if your software program can do that. Okay.
I'm growing more than I can sell. So
Yeah.
It'll be an easy, an easy thing, or at least straightforward.
And
I
I
think
would add for vegetables, there's profitability software out there that really helps. A lot of people have discovered they love growing, pick a crop, broccoli, snap peas, and they don't make any money out of it. They would be better off not growing that crop. And it's sad, but true. It's really hard, to grow every crop profitably. So that's not a certification issue, but we all want you to survive. And so using your software to drive your profitability and efficiency is really smart.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think that's about our time. If everybody has other questions, or if I can ask Gary for stories all night long, but I don't know if we want to.
And I could tell you stories all night long.
Yeah.
I gotta tell you one story though. Our inspector one time, and this only happened one time, but we rode around. It takes us a day, good day. We start at 8 o'clock in the morning. It might be 6, 7 o'clock at night before we get done. So it is a big day. We were riding around with my one inspector one day, and he was typing on his laptop while we were riding around, and had all the information in his laptop, and then we decided to go back to the house and kind of put it together. Got back to the house, and he lost everything he typed on that computer our whole ride.
Oh. Oh, no.
Oh, and it was, I don't know, it was an error someplace along the line, but it was just something like we had to start out. So it was like 10 or 11 o'clock that night before we got done.
That is
So
a nightmare. That is a nightmare.
Yeah.
I have an enjoyable inspection story. I would often do Amish neighborhoods, so I'd have large clusters of Amish. And this one fella took me around with a buggy to look at the fields. And of course, they noted that I enjoyed that. And every farm I inspected in Hazleton that year, Gary, they had the buggy waiting for the inspector to go around the fields. So it could be quite a pleasant experience too. And I got
Hey, Jack,
lots of Amish stories, but
Jack,
that's
when
only
you were
one I'll tell.
talking about what things you do, you missed one thing. You didn't talk about being a rock picker.
Did you pick some
Pardon?
rocks, Jack, to get
Oh
help
yeah,
some farmer?
yeah. That's a way to curry favor with an organic farmer is to pick a few rocks. I've been
we got a
Gary's
farm
rock
down-
picker for a few years.
We got a farm down where Jack lives, and every once in a while we'll go down there and there'll be some nice piles of rock piled up for us that he has found and gathered for us. So
Yeah, you could throw in some weeds if you have any left and call it a deal. I love it. I'll tell one quick transportation story, and that is a pasture-based farm. And boy, I don't remember the weather being bad when we started off, but this is a big farm, 400 acres, and we had to scoot around. And it was fun for me. We got to ride four-wheelers to go scooting around, which is how they do it. And I got my clipboard with paper, and I'm taking some notes. And somehow I had that. It was like in my backpack. I had something, And man, about halfway through, it got darker, and we're just going to hurry up and do these. And it just unleashed on us, and we had an amazing thunderstorm. And then we're going, but we had to see all the fields, and see the animals, and we just pushed through it. And we're riding through the mud and through the dirt roads, and we came back, and it just looked like you had sprayed me with a manure hose. We were both so muddy. It was just, so they gave me some rags, and I kind of wiped down. It was absolutely fun and horrendous. So that after that, I remembered to always have a change of clothes in the car, just in case there was a second inspection that day, or I didn't want to get back in the car. Well, very good. Anything else today? Gene?
Would my inspector have any interest in looking at my field that is in transition? Or are they not interested until I click the magic button that I've gone through my 3 years?
Great question. So do you have any certifiable fields, Genes, or is it just the Like you've got, is it kind of all in one schedule? It's going to go from transitional to organic?
I have 6 acres that I got certified back in 2021, I want to say. And then I have this
Ah.
new that I am working on getting certified. When I'm working, I just started, I took it away from the conventional farmer in November.
Okay, now
So
I
I was-
understand.
So over the spring, I planted it, so it's in its first year of transition.
You know,
Oh,
because that's a transitional field, we might be able to chat agronomy with you more than your organic fields because it wouldn't be consulting. We'd be talking about a transitional field. Does that seem about right,
Awesome.
Mark?
yeah, I think the absolute emphatic answer is yes. You should include that field in your paperwork. You should tell your certifier about it, and your certifier will walk you through transition. So you will show your certifier your seed tags every year for that field, fertility amendments, and then you don't have to do that 3-year review when you first want to get it certified. The field's
Oh,
okay. The certifier will say, hey, Gene, looks like this field is going to be certifiable on August 10th, 2026 or whatever.
okay.
Right? And
Gene, we'll look at those fields this summer, like Gene and I have arranged for me to visit her farm, so
I love it.
we'll look at the transitional ones for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, inspectors talk, they can say fun things like, oh, you should go to a field day. Oh, have you gone to Iowa State's field day? Or, oh, I heard so-and-so is having a field day on, row crop seed varieties or row crop weed control, or somebody's trying out their new flamer. Learning from other farmers is the number one thing I would suggest to people. And so inspectors will just tell you those kind of things. That's not really consulting. That's just talking about publicly available resources. And the more you tell them about your farm without, spending 8 hours chit-chatting, the better. So if you say, hey, I know how to do vegetables over here, but I'm learning field crop agronomy, oh man, they'll help you out. Well, very good. Yeah, we could talk all night, but I think we do have a time limit on this. So Jack and
Yeah,
I will pass the ball to you.
no, it's okay. And thank you so much, Jack and Mark, for an amazing presentation and for facilitating a really great conversation. And thank you to Jean and Gary for sharing your stories and questions. I certainly learned a lot. And thank you for letting me be here too.
Okay.
As Ethan mentioned in the beginning, he is most likely going to lead the rest of the webinars, but it was great to meet all of you. And I will be posting this, so it'll be available for continued viewing. And of course, please reach out to Ethan or Jack or Mark if you have follow-up questions after this. So yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Absolutely. Nice to meet
Bye,
you all.
everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great
Cheers.
night.
Thanks for jumping in.